This may seem strange, but the first thing I thought of when I started to think about how our new home should be was my mother. Nell had a way of welcoming people into her home that made them feel wanted and special at the same time. The minute you walked into her house, you felt like you had reached some sort of sanctuary. She threw amazing parties where everyone participated, and she was super organized. She always used to say, "A place for everything and everything in its place." Even though she's been gone for over 25 years, she still resonates in everything I do. So, as we designed and built the house, I would be holding her in my thoughts and thinking of how she would have done things. Now, if Mom was going to be the heart of the house, Dad was definitely going to be the brains. George was a function over form type of architect. There has to be a reason for everything. Otherwise, you just don't build it. For example, Dad hated hallways because, to him, they were a waste of space. Most of his designs minimized hallways or got rid of them. All of his designs were modern, efficient, and, in my opinion, elegant. I was going to try to emulate him as much as possible. To me, designing a house begins with making decisions about how you want to live. So I would think about the times when I was really happy in my home. Of course, parties would come to mind, especially dinner parties with good friends. I remembered this really cool, funky house in Topanga Canyon that I rented with my buddy Carlos back in the 80s. Even though it would leak like a sieve and let in all sorts of critters, it had a feel to it that was perfect for country living. I guess you could say it had soul. I wanted our new house to have soul too. After thinking of all the good times with friends and family, I started to visualize our life in Argentina. I pretended we were in our home or on the river or hiking or whatever, and tried to really see us there. All sorts of details would come to mind, and I would take note if there was something we'd need our new home to be or do for us to help create that particular vision.
Eventually, though, you have to stop visualizing and start designing. I have tremendous respect for architects, especially after designing this house. I'm sure if I'd hired an architect, they would have designed the house much faster, much more efficiently than I did. You see, the problem with me is I had three things against me. One, I'd never designed a house before. Two, it was going to be my house. Three, I'm an engineer. You put those three things together, and better always trumps good enough. The ugly truth is that I would get up in the morning at 5 o'clock, work on the design, go to work, come back, put Max to bed, work on the design, go to sleep. 2 years after starting this process, I'm still designing the house. I know, it's pathetic, but there it is. But one thing I will say, after being an engineer for 25 years and working on dozens of design teams, is that when it comes to the design process, it's always darkest before the dawn. It's like, just when you think it couldn't be crazier, more chaotic, more ideas, nothing makes sense, nothing's coming together, all of a sudden, there's something that happens that just, well, makes everything converge. It's like the supersaturated solution in high school chemistry. You drop the grain of salt in the supersaturated solution and boom, right before your eyes, everything crystallizes into a solid. And at least in my case, when designing La Colmena, that's what happened.
The grain for me was when I was at work, listening to one of our chief engineers describe a satellite cellular phone system we were building for Mexico. Satellites need to optimize how they use power to transmit signals to the Earth. So each beam was being focused into a hexagonal projection and then arranged so as to tile the state of Mexico in a honeycomb fashion. Our chief engineer said hexagons were the most efficient use of space. After all, if the bees use them, they must be good. A light bulb turned on in my head. Dad always used space efficiently. Bees are some of the most efficient animals on the planet. They use hexagons to build their homes. And that's how the idea for La Colmena, or the Beehive, was born.
Now, this may seem weird, but I'd like to pause and give a special thanks to the Google Corporation for providing all these free applications that they provide over the internet. I think I used every single one of them building La Colmena. It started out obviously with the search engine. We used Google search to find the parcels that we were looking for in this area here.
Then I used Google Earth to basically fly up rivers and look for optimal places for us to live. We were looking for land on the south bank of rivers that got plenty of sun. Also, all of my email correspondences to Argentina were written in English and then passed through Google Translate to convert them to Spanish. I would always review them afterward, but for the most part, they were good to go.
At one point, we were going to hire an architect to build the house for us. We would have weekly meetings using a Google application called Google Chat, which I think is now called Google Hangout, video conferencing software. Seeing that guy's expression every week when we would meet with him to discuss responsibilities convinced me to build the house myself. And in hindsight, I think we're really, really happy with that decision. I'm convinced that it would have cost twice as much and taken twice as long if we had hired an architect. Más Doria. Yeah.
But the most important app I used was Google SketchUp. I designed the entire house in it, including the plumbing, electrical, and heating systems. I used it to create this book that storyboarded the entire construction process. I gave it to my workers so they would understand how I wanted to build the house. Having the pictures allowed me to communicate, in my bad Spanish, exactly what I wanted to do. I was amazed at how fast I was able to learn how to use the application. Within a couple of days, I was laying out floor plans and playing around with different design concepts. I designed all of the furniture for La Colmena in SketchUp and used it to generate cut lists that greatly simplified the process of buying and then cutting the lumber that we used to build the furniture. SketchUp is a great tool. I don't build anything anymore without first going into SketchUp, laying everything out, and making sure that I'm thinking straight about what I really want to do.
And here we are, sharing our accomplishments with you over YouTube, which is a Google service. Now, I don't know why all of these things are free. Maybe one of these days somebody's going to start charging us for it. But for now, I'm loving it. I could have built La Colmena without all that stuff, but it sure made it a lot easier for me. So, thank you, Google.